Dear colleagues, good morning. Dear participants of today's event, of this roundtable, current issues of inclusion of the Roma national minority in the Ukrainian society. It is 12 o'clock, so we shall start our roundtable. I am glad to welcome you all on behalf of our committee on human rights, the occupation and reintegration of temporary occupied territories in Donetsk, Lugansk Oblast, Autonomous Republic of Crimea, national minorities and interethnic relations. I want to thank all participants for having this opportunity to join our roundtable. We organized this event according to the schedule of the work of our committee. For many years, Romas remained the most vulnerable ethnic group that experienced systemic discriminations in different spheres of public life. This situation takes place not only in Ukraine, in all Europe, and probably the world over. Main problems of Roma are probably the same in all countries: social isolation from local population, unsatisfactory conditions of life, poverty, a low level of education or no education, bad health, insufficient access to medical services. Unfortunately, recently, we observe in our country the growth of xenophobic moods in society towards Roma. We see that number of incidents is growing. During the lengthy pandemic, mentioned problems of Roma became even more acute. Practically all problems of Roma population are systemic, comprehensive, and they require engagement of all state executive authorities, legislative authorities to resolve them. During today's roundtable, we shall discuss all those issues, and I would ask all the speakers that a part of mentioning the problems, please propose your vision, how you see to resolve this or that problem. Of course, a part of the problems that I have mentioned, there is also a huge problem with employment, documentation, employment, social protection, improving housing conditions, counteracting discrimination, xenophobic moods, and stigma regarding Romas. In particular, I want to mention importance to protect Roma women. Today, we have engaged broad representations, our international partners and Ukraine state authorities and local organizations, civil society organizations, human rights organizations that work in this sphere. I want to wish that today's discussion is most constructive and substantive, that based on the results of this roundtable, we elaborate practical recommendations towards different ministries regarding probable changes in legislation. I also want to say that, in my view, a resolution of numerous problems of Romas should be facilitated by new Roma strategy and action plan that finally has been approved by Cabinet of Ministers. Dear colleagues, before we come to direct agenda, I ask you to stick to the time limitations. We shall work for almost 4.5 hours. Each presenter will have possibility to speak within 5 minutes. Please watch the time. I also want that after a block of presentations, all those willing could either make their comments or ask questions. For that, we shall allocate up to 1 minute. We have a joint chat. Please write your name and surname to chat, which organization you represent and whom you want to ask the question. I will give you the floor. So 1 minute for comment or question, 5 minutes for presentations. In the end, we shall summarize the results. So, dear colleagues, I kindly ask you to turn on the microphone for speaking only when I give you the floor. Secretariat will watch it. Then they will switch off your microphone. Thank you, colleagues. I invite you to fruitful participation. I also would like to invite Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, a person who is always together with is raising questions to Roma minority, helping to resolve them. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I welcome you all, wish you high spirits and constructive work. We all know that Article 24, we always mention this article, all citizens of Ukraine have equal rights and opportunities and are equal before the law. But the current situation is somehow adjusting the provisions of Constitution, at least situation what we have with COVID-19. There are questions regarding abiding by principle of equality and non-discrimination in all spheres of public life. And in this situation, it became even more acute, especially it is true to most vulnerable groups, Roma minority, who are most vulnerable in these conditions. And Roma are one of the most vulnerable groups in the country. Number of applications filed to Ombudsman Office is growing. Within last month, we got more than 52,000 applications. Last year, we had 48,000 for entire year. People applied to us more and more, informing about violations of their rights. We must say this number of applications that we receive regarding discrimination based on ethnic principle is growing 50%. The biggest number, 33%, are informations about violations of rights of citizens of Roma ethnicity. In 2020, together with Council of Europe and our human rights activists, we presented our special report of investment impact on pandemic on Roma community. Now we are conducting monitoring visits to find how these recommendations provided are implemented. One must say that summarizing the results of monitoring visits, we may conclude there are a number of systemic violations of rights of Roma ethnic minority, impossibility to realize their rights and freedom. Again, this is connected with absence of documents, absence of identification documents of great number of Roma. There are numerous cases of ambiguous attitude of representative state authorities when they process the documents or issue in passport. That violates fundamental rights for social protection, for education, employment, and decent living conditions. During monitoring, we establish facts of discrimination of Roma minority, impossibility to get social benefit, including low-income families' health, refusal to provide healthcare services. They get less services or in poorer conditions, impossibility to get engaged in education process, language barrier. Children who go to school often do not know not only Ukrainian language, but even Ukrainian alphabet. Refusal to provide employment because of Roma ethnicity. Mass unemployment of adult Romas cause a situation that they live below poverty line. Hate speech is growing towards Roma ethnic minority. A shameful example are cases of anti-Roma rhetorics from local authorities. In June 2021, Mayor of Rivne offered Romas within several hours' time to get packed and move. Otherwise, they will be forcefully moved to Zakarpattia. We responded to that, and criminal cases opened based on Article 1 of Criminal Code, instigating of interethnic hatred. Rivne Mayor officially apologized for his behavior. In August, Mayor of Drogovic city at a meeting informed that central part of Drogovic is occupied by gypsies and homeless people. Based on my response letter, Drogovic City Council published official position on ensuring principle of non-discrimination for every minority, including Roma. Apart from that, local council initiated regular meetings with heads of local ethnic community to establish dialogue and understanding between them. Main challenges for Ukraine, absence of administrative and criminal liability for discrimination, and difficulty to realize it in practice. There are draft laws in Parliament about harmonization of legislation, 0931, an administrative offense that provide to fill the gaps in the legislation. I support adoption of the mentioned draft laws and hope they will be reviewed and adopted by Parliament quite soon. The issue of inclusion, Roma national minority into Ukrainian society is my priority and is under my control. I am very thankful to you for this event. You, Mr. Chairman, are raising this issue at such high level. If we together care about the rights of representatives of all national minorities, the rights will be abided by the state, first of all. Thank you. I wish you health. Now I invite Madam Antilia Bogner, head of the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lubinets. Thank you, colleagues, partners, participants. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm very pleased to be here today and to discuss this important topic. Our office has been, as part of the UN, works on the principle of leave no one behind. This principle lies at the core of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and represents the unequivocal commitment of all UN member states, including Ukraine, to end discrimination and exclusion of all vulnerable groups, including Roma. This commitment is especially relevant during the pandemic, as crises tend to exacerbate inequalities in society, and COVID-19 response measures need to be sensitive to this and ensure that they don't reinforce patterns of discrimination against groups that are already facing inequalities, such as Roma. Last year, we prepared a briefing note on the impact of COVID-19 on Roma communities in Ukraine, which covered issues of discrimination that impacted access to medical services, education, work, and so on in the context of the pandemic. In this context, we also need to ensure equal access to vaccinations and medical care to all, including to groups that are often left behind. It's also important to speed up initiatives that can address the needs of those who are in economically fragile situations to overcome the negative socioeconomic consequences of the pandemic. Impunity is a longer-term issue that the mission has been monitoring. While we have seen a decrease in violent attacks against Roma in Ukraine, investigation and prosecution of past attacks remain ineffective, and bias motives of the perpetrators are systematically not taken into account during the classification of these crimes. This leads to a concerning level of impunity, Our mission recently addressed the General Prosecutor's Office regarding the regular absences of prosecutors during the court hearings of the murder of a Roma leader in Vilshani in the Kharkov region, which has resulted in undue delays of more than 4 years in this case. Roma people still face stigmatization. They face hate speech and bias. Roma women face additional marginalization owing to intersectional discrimination due to their ethnic origin and gender. We're concerned about the regular use of hate speech inciting violence against Roma online and offline. Law enforcement authorities do not adequately respond to incitement to hatred against Roma, including during public assemblies. We saw this recently in Irpin in the Kiev region, where a conflict between Roma and other members of the local community triggered protests where hate speech inciting violence against Roma was not addressed appropriately by the police. At the same time, the adoption of the new strategy for the promotion of the realization of the rights and opportunities of persons belonging to the Roma national minority that is for up until 2030. We hope that it will help to address the concerns that I have mentioned above. It will be important to adopt an action plan and provide adequate funding for the full implementation of the strategy. It will also be important to ensure the participation of Roma, including Roma women, in policy making that concerns them, including at the regional and local levels and in budgeting processes. If the target communities are not involved, it's unlikely that the measures will be effective. We also hope to see more collection of disaggregated data that can be used to help further refine policies and actions. Roma civil society can play an important role in all of these efforts. I'd just like to thank you again for allowing me to join you today, and I look forward to the important discussion ahead.
Дякую, пані Матильда.
Thank you, Matilda. I render the floor to Zefira Kondo, who is Coordinator of Council Project Strengthening the Protection of National Minorities, including Mother. Thank you, colleagues, partners, participants. I welcome you on behalf of Council of Europe. It's a great honor for me to speak at the opening of this roundtable on inclusion of the Roma national minority into Ukrainian society. Activity of Council of Europe in this sphere is based on the provision that protection of national minority is part of general protection of humans and framework convention of European Charter of Regional or Minority Languages. Committee of Ministers of Council of Europe improved strategic action plan regarding Roma and travelers until the period 2020-2025 and fight against anti-Roma moods and supporting equality. The new plan only strengthened the previous plan on inclusion of Roma. It could be taken into account after strengthening implementation of Roma strategy in Ukraine, which was approved in summer this year. Roma civil society plays a very important role in liquidating discrimination. Council of Europe of Office ensures representation of Romas at all levels in order that voice of Roma men and women is heard everywhere. In the light of reform of decentralization in Ukraine, local authorities play a decisive role in ensuring improvement of life of communities, including Roma communities, by providing quality services, healthcare, education, job, ensuring proper access to them of all straight population. Engagement of local authorities is very important to improve conditions of local community. I'm glad to see among participants representatives of local self-government. When talking about role of local self-government, I want to welcome Ukraine with recognition of profession of community mediator. This profession is included in the new classifier of profession. That means that local authority, in case of need, can hire Roma mediators. Our clear achievement in the course of many years is engagement of reliable and initiative partners, local leaders of organizations with whom we hope to continue effective cooperation further. I thank you all for your attention. I thank Committee of Human Rights for their long-lasting support, and I hope that this roundtable will be fruitful and help to plan future actions.
Завжди допомагає комітету, в тому числі і по цих питаннях.
And we are grateful to the Council of Europe in helping with these issues. And we are moving to the first section of our discussion, a strategy to promote the rights and opportunities of persons belonging to the Roma national minority in Ukrainian society until 2030. And we give the floor to Ms. Olena Bogdan, head of the State Service of Ukraine for Ethnopolitics and Freedom of Conscience. I'm glad to welcome you on behalf of the State Service of Ukraine for Ethnopolitics and Freedom of Conscience. We are tasked with the coordination of the policy, and this year a new strategy was adopted that must promote the realization of persons who belong to national minorities by 2030. It is a framework document that specifies 8 areas of work. And the work involving this document took a lot of effort involving our civil society partners. When we were working on this strategy, we included international experience, and we also pointed out that we used the strategic action plan for Roma and travelers inclusion 2020-2025, and also the OSCE experience. And when we've been working on this strategy, we also took into account the inclusive consultations. We opened an online discussion and invited all the experts and civil society members and international partners could sign up to those thematic groups, and we carried out consultations on every block. And in this consultations, we met with the executive authorities and the civil society. And I'm happy to note that the representatives of the authorities commented on every proposal that came from the society. We gathered the proposals, sent it to the theme groups, and then discussed through all the proposals that we received. What must be underlined is that the desire to achieve specific results. So, in shortly, I would like to comment on the monitoring visits, and I will describe some critical issues that would allow us to explain the major challenges that we face and all the structures if we want to change the situation for the better. According to the assessment of the authorities and other persons, there is a settlement of 8,500 persons, and there is no access to the settlement. We don't know how many children there are. There is one school there, and initial consultations show that it is unlikely that the school covers all the children. The art school there showed that Roma children are fantastic in arts, but we couldn't carry out the dialogue because The Roma children do not speak Ukrainian, so it was impossible to discuss. And if we look at this isolation coupled with poverty, it is a vicious circle, and we need to see how to break it. And some strategic steps are obvious, but the question then comes how to implement them in practice. Firstly, we need the census in this settlement. And also, what are the questions of the ban on access to this settlement, because it's a public territory, and it cannot be possible in Ukraine to be banned from walking on the streets of the settlement. And also the question of access of children to the school infrastructure, and we need school monitoring. Social workers and also national police must work with with parents of those children if they are absent from school. There must be also the monitoring of the education quality. And we identified 2 schools in 2 different cities where we identified the signals that there is an imitation of education, because children, according to the results of the educational process, cannot even read or write. So the teachers seemingly register that the children are there, making roll calls. But when we talk to parents, they state that the children do not receive basic skills. So the question is how the education process is going on, and how do we deal with the situation in question. The problem belongs to the sphere of the decisions that must be made on the level of local self-governing bodies. They are a separate branch from the local authorities, so again, the effort belongs to the local self-governing bodies. And thank you. Thank you, Ms. Olena. In the chat, we have a question. It's a request to the administrators, please switch off the mic if you do not speak. So we have a question from Olga Vesnyanka. You're welcome, Ms. Olga. Thank you, Mr. Lubinets, Ms. Olena, Ms. Matilda. As for the new government Roma strategy, thank you for telling us how the process went. And could you tell us how exactly we can see the design of the action plan to this strategy, and how do you cooperate with the local oblast administrations, because every region has its own specificity and we need to take into account the needs of the communities that are present in the specific oblasts. And again, the census, according to the national characteristics, did not fit, because mapping of creating a social atlas, mapping of Roma communities is what is fitting, is a good tool. And we already had the example of this in the Donetska Oblast administrations and in Kiev. And in Kiev, I'm a consultant and a human rights defender on including Roma rights. Thank you, Ms. Olga. There are 2 types of plans, the national plan, and we are responsible for its design, and also the regional plans. Regional plans in the version that we've seen put up for public discussion is available at the official site of our service. After that, it was additionally modified, and now it is on the interagency level of procedure, and we will be able to see the national plan when we'll have the final decision of the government. Nonetheless, we are actively engaging the oblast administrations, and without waiting the official adoption of the national plan, we are initiating a specific design of recommendations with the most active administrations and local self-governing bodies who are with us from the start, so that the administrations would have it easy when it comes to designing the plans, and also when it concerns the challenges that when it comes to extra funding, because the administrations, the local self-government would need extra funding for that. And a big challenge within the decentralization reform is that to combine the self-governing bodies, the local and central executive bodies, their efforts need to be combined. And when I say census, I don't mean the all Ukrainian censuses, but the census of the people who are in the settlement, because if nobody can get access to the settlement, then we have no specific information who lives where, which makes it impossible to further observe the situation and see to the quality of education for children. But this is the way to resolve the issue of inclusion and integration, at least for this new generation. Thank you. We have one more question. Rada Kalandia. Maybe we're experiencing certain technical issues. Hello, I hope you hear me. My name is Rada Kalandia. The question is about the plan and the strategy. About the funding of the plan and the strategy. Now, the mechanisms of funding are very diversified. On one hand, part of these actions are carried out within the framework of the already existing programs or allocations according to the salary fund with specific bodies. For example, if we have assistance to families with difficult living circumstances, which includes Roma families. If we look at Zakarpattia, according to the data, substantive sums of money are allocated to combating unemployment, and also there are specific programs where also the Roma community is covered. Another thing is it's important to have specific programs of events that we could further implement with the civil society and also, if necessary, with businesses. And we suggested some funding for the next year, although our proposals were supported by both committees of the Verkhovna Rada. And here we're grateful to Dmytro Lubinets and other MPs, and we are still to see how they're going to be taking into account some of them, and further steps are in this field will also promote the use of references to these documents and increase our chances to acquire additional funding, and not only the ones that we have say by the state migration service or the ones that are implemented by the local authorities that are targeted at vulnerable population. But if we talk about the funding of school education and local infrastructure, meaning waste disposal and water supply services, then we see the situation where we need the participation of local self-governing authorities, and they are, of course, governed by the laws of Ukraine. And on the one hand, we can say that we have specific funding and they support the activity that was in place before. And in fact, on the website of our service, you could see the events carried out for 2020. But on the other hand, in our opinion, there must be support within the framework and of civic organizations that also look after religious and other organizations and ethnic organizations, so that we can cooperate with civil society unions. And we were impressed by the positive example in Uzhhorod, where there are preschool courses conducted by non-governmental organization, and in 7 months they help children to increase their language level and to adapt to social expectations in society. We met with the mothers of those children and with the children themselves, and they shared their experiences, and so that they could be enrolled in schools. And this is a very positive experience, and it's important so that we find the support from the state, and also so that we could use this mechanism everywhere and not just depend on grants. So this, sharing this experience and implementing it, we could find the program of support for the activities of civic organizations. And the last question from Marina Bublik, Nizhyn Council. The state service designs only oblast plan, but what about locally? All the work on implementation of the strategy is put on the NGOs and the Ministry of Culture. Why not include it with other structures? So what some aspects could be carried out by central authorities. We design what is done on the central level. Then the oblast administrations, they design the regional plans, and they can help with the recommendations, and we can provide recommendations that they can take into account. And we came to the administrations with the proposals to create working groups to combine expertise from different regional centers, and since we are informed, some administrations already work with such structures, and they work on the regional level towards the implementation of this strategy. Dear colleagues, we move on to the next section, which is access to quality education for Roma children. And I would like to give the floor to Eleonora Kulchar, head of the Roma Early Childhood Network. You're welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to participate in this round table. And I would like to say that, firstly, I would like to accentuate the early development of Roma children. And I'm very grateful to Olena Bogdan and that she noticed and she mentioned our organization and its importance. We've been working for 8 years, and just in 2020, we went through the independent monitoring in our work to prepare Roma children for school.
Мониторинг пройден хорошо, потому что все 180...
Our monitoring was successful. All the children whom we prepared, they went to school, they all study quite well. They attend Ukrainian school. Essentially, unfortunately, there is also a segregated school. We have nothing to do with it. And their level of education is quite low. It's true. Some children in senior classes of school cannot read or write. Our network this year, we took part in the monitoring of early development conducted by University of Barcelona. In all regions of Ukraine, situation of early development of Roma children and preparation to school is quite low. In the Carpathian and other regions, what we need to conduct restructuring, to make preschool development, early development, accessible to Roma children. There are kindergartens for that, some people can argue, but Roma families are poor. Roma parents cannot pay for all services of kindergarten and to provide clothing for a child. Our preschool preparation is fully for free. We provide everything to children, and parents bring children to our office. There are too many children. We have not enough premises to include them all. But we need that all over Ukraine, including our area, Zakarpattia, Uzhhorod, to have more centers for early development of children and work with parents. Where could it be? It could be a separate class in existing kindergartens or a separate secondary school, but give possibility for different charity organizations, civil society organizations to do it. I'm a Roma woman myself. I know how to get approach, to find the way how I can contact parents and prepare children, how to work with them and promote early development of Roma children. That could be also a practice for students of universities. Thank you. Thank you, Eleonora. I give the floor to Yuri Kononenko, head of the main department of General Secondary and Preschool Education of Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine.
Добрий день, шановні колеги. Дозвольте.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Allow me to say a few words on that. Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, Department of Education at regional level, pay considerable attention to this problem for many years. We are keeping permanent contact with Roma community, draw attention of leaders of local self-government to problems that Romas have. This year, in 2021, to study what is the situation with education in general secondary education where minority children study, including Roma children. From 7th to 9th of June, there was a monitoring visit of staff of Ministry of Education Together with local councillors and local administration, we visited school number 3 with profound study of particular subjects. A round table was organized studying peculiarities of educational process in classes with Roma students and with participation of educators of Mukachevo community. Based on the results of this roundtable, recommendations were provided. How to mainstream the work and raise awareness among Roma community regarding gender education and quality study of state language. There was, in August, there was a Ukrainian forum on education without barriers. In Uzhgorod, one section was working education for national minorities, challenges, opportunities took place in Uzhgorod. With participation of representatives different parts of Ukraine. Uzhgorod Gymnasium School 14 shared their experience of organization, educational process in their school and in other schools. The ministry is taking systemic measures to help educators and students during pandemic period, starting from 2020. All Ukraine School Online platform was created. They organized lectures on 17 subjects, school disciplines for children from grade 5 to 11, and teachers can use them as model for their own lessons. In conclusion, I would like to appeal to parents, raise responsibility of parents. The law on general secondary education, Article 25, says that parents of students are obliged, are responsible for provision of education to their children. Here we should work a lot together with Roma community because this is extremely important. Thank you. Thank you, Yuri. I have not seen any questions in chat. Eleonora, please, you want to ask a question? Turn on her microphone, please. Thank you very much. What I want to emphasize, importance of work with Roma children. The main focus is at preschool education. If we take children of grade 7 or 8, we have prepared them before, but early development and work with parents is very important. Those parents who brought their children to our early education classes, they continue being responsible. Now their kids are in grade 7 and 8 and they are successful. Question, what are the proposals to improve online education? What proposals can be made? Well, I cannot understand your question. What proposals? Maybe the Ministry of Education understand that children are in lengthy quarantine period. They are all studying online for quite a long time. Maybe ministry is developing new approaches to that. Just look, Mr. Chairman, ministry has developed regulations, how to organize distance learning. You can use them. As regards the work of educators and teachers during distance learning, back at the beginning of lockdown in spring 2020, ministry provided explanations that a teacher and an educator must use all possible methods and instruments to help children. I understand the hidden meaning of your question. What measures could be taken in the light of the current situation? The numerous families, including Roma families, have no access to email and to electronic devices, but this is outside the competence of Ministry of Education. Thank you. Since we are discussing problems of Roma minority, I think it is a big problem. Numerous families, especially Roma families, have no access to internet. It's not even so much issue of gadgets. They have gadgets, but there is no internet connection in the settlements where they live. I want to emphasize this, and in the strategy approved by Cabinet of Ministers, in the chapter of realization and provisions that Minister of Education is responsible for, maybe allocate additional funds to provide internet connection to Roma settlements. That's what I saw. Mr. Lubinet, it's not the Ministry of Education who is responsible for that, but Ministry of Information and Digitalization. In Ukraine, only 16 schools have. Ministry of Education is responsible for internet connection to school and education establishment. Only 16 schools do not have it. But as regards internet connection to villages and towns, this is the responsibility of Ministry of Information and Digitalization. As I see it, all connected with ministry, all connected with education process is responsibility of your ministry. But Cabinet of Ministers is responsible for all ministries, but your ministry should be responsible for education process. Volodymyr, please. The problem is not so much with internet connection, but in conditions of extreme poverty, people will not have money to pay for internet connection. We had cases with water supply. A water pipeline was settled in the village, but people don't pay for it. They have no money. 4G internet is available. If you have enough money to pay for it, you can get connected. Even if the state decides to organize internet connection, situation will not improve. Dear colleagues, there is a question, maybe within the framework of new strategy, courses should be organized for those who are willing to work with children. Since there are certain requirements to pedagogical education, to educational process. As far as I understand it, this question, in order to work with children, you must have pedagogical education. Am I right? And maybe Yuri Kononenko is correct. Can Ministry of Education facilitate that? In order to work with children, it is desirable to have pedagogical education, but not necessary. The legislation says if you have any higher education, you can work with children. As regards possible methods of work with children, very interesting. If people have some university diplomas, they can help with work with children. We only welcome that. Dear colleagues, there are no more questions. We continue to the next block access to employment and social protection. I invite Taya Abram, representative International Roma Women's Fund Chirikli. Good afternoon, all participants. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Talking about employment and social protection. Based on the Renaissance Foundation study, only 27% labor age population of Roma people are employed, and only 16% get social benefit, although many people allege that Roma families live only on social benefit. There are big problems with Roma women employment because they have no completed education and they cannot get registered at employment center and go to vocational training courses. The new requirements to get social benefits approved recently impact negatively because previously for single women, it was the only source of revenue. So Roma mediator can help with that. We welcome including mediator profession into classifier. And I hope that mediators will be engaged actively, and we are ready to facilitate that. We work to improve employment. We have two initiatives, one called Power Roma Women, implemented with Finland and Belarus, and Helsinki Institute. Project aimed at provision of vocational skills and knowledge that help a person to start your own business or get employed. Women who go through training work in the sphere of beauty. The other one helps to develop your own business for Romas as a response to COVID crisis. 6 initiatives have been supported and we plan to develop this work further. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to Angelika Belova, head of the Roma public organization, Voice of the Roma. Good afternoon. I thank you for organization of this important event for Roma community and for the opportunity to speak. I work in the Roma movement for 6 years. Different studies and conversations with Roma women, we found that what is the main obstacle for women's employment? Very often, absence of documents or partial access of documents, no completed secondary education. In Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk region, 60% of women have not completed secondary education. 15% of women have no education at all, to say nothing about special higher education, and they cannot get employment, which is only aggravated by discrimination of employment. Numerous cases at Roma mediated registered prove it. And traditional view of role of women in conservative Roma community. We have projects of developing skills, helping women to get speciality quickly. Our concept has several components: getting speciality, special courses on communication skills, literacy skills, computer literacy, financial literacy, even car driving courses. And our final goal to open co-working center in Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk region. It's a great opportunity for women to find a job and help other women who are in dire life circumstances. We are engaged in donor money for our concept and engaging specialists. We thank our partners, Pact Organization, International Renaissance Foundation, and International Women's Fund for support. To disseminate our results, we need gradual steps from the state. Now, with the support of Roma organization, of state service, of ethnic policy, we developed a strategy, and the strategy was approved until 2030. That includes many items like that. And action plan is approved. The most important task is to elaborate regional plans with participation of regional authorities and engagement of Roma community. We are lobbying development of social entrepreneurship, ensuring right to education at all levels, access to distance learning for children who do not have gadgets or have no internet. We provided our recommendations to national action plan and regional action plan about access of children to co-working offices and hubs, and number of other tasks that are important based on the results of our study. Regional plans have been discussed today. We have elaborated first draft of regional plan jointly with the Department of Culture of Zaporizhia Regional Administration. In mid-November, there'll be a session with local authority on the realization of regional plan. Thank you.
Дякую. Передаю слово.
Thank you. And I give the floor to Ruslan Kolbasa, Director General of the Directorate for the Development of Social Services and Protection of Children's Rights of the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Lubinets. Unfortunately, Mr. Kolbasa is engaged elsewhere and doesn't have time to participate, so I will be here in his stead. So the question of protecting people in difficult living circumstances is a priority for the ministry. And the new strategy on executing rights and exercising rights of the individuals is paramount for us. So overcoming difficult circumstances that negatively affect the health and the development of a person, where this family or the person cannot overcome themselves. So the question of protection, provision of social services for Roma is suggested to be included into the strategy. Social support for the persons in difficult circumstances is one of them. So prevention is also part of the work, but without close cooperation with the NGO and representatives of the Roma national minority is impossible, because it is them who know the specificities of the community, and it is thanks to the international cooperation, in particular the International Roma Women's Fund, Chirikli, we adopted the state standard for the service. We introduced the profession of community mediators, and currently social services carry out work on identifying and providing social services to families with children who live in difficult circumstances, specifically Roma. And the Ministry of Social Policy designed the procedure of provision of social protection to children who are in difficult circumstances, specifically those who were victims of abuse and violence. And together with local authorities, healthcare bodies, educational institutions, and other organizations, we work to provide social protection to children. And it also covers the children of Roma national minority, if these children live in difficult circumstances because of abuse and domestic violence, and there is a threat to their life and health, which is established according to the assessment of the needs of the family. Another step to resolve the issues encountered by a Roma minority is the prevention of discrimination. There is an expert council to combat discrimination based on gender. So the prevention and also combating the violations remains a paramount priority, and also methods of prevention of this discrimination. And it is national social services that are carrying out this work, especially in implementing state social policy. And one of the major issues is the domestic violence. So the state program on combating and preventing gender-based violence also presupposes that in 2021-2023, there will be special services to support the victims. And in 2021, 124 communities received funding to improve the activities of specialized services. We have 30 shelters, 30 day centers, and also vehicles for mobile brigades that work with shelters in order to improve the provision of social services. Thank you. And I give the floor to Alexander Nosikov, head of the Department for Monitoring of Social Processes of the Research Institute of Labor and Employment of the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine and the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. Thank you. Do you hear me? Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear participants. In my speech, I would like to familiarize you with a new profession, community mediator, which came into force by the order of the Ministry of Economic Development in October this year. This profession was designed not only to work with Roma minority. It has a general purpose, but the content, the qualification characteristics, and the so-called heart of this process was Ms. Zemfira Kondor, famous Roma activist. So what kind of position is this? I will use the term ethnic and national minorities, but in this case, we'll also be talking about Roma. So this worker works on the territory of a local community with the representatives of the ethnic or national minority to exercise their rights to receive services stipulated by the law and to settle interethnic conflicts. They organize and provide interlanguage and intercultural communication with the representatives of the state authorities and local self-governing authorities and ethnic minorities, and also with those who represent the ethnic majority on the territory. They also participate in public discussions, round tables, and other events, and they promote mutual understanding and the understanding of their issues, social issues, educational issues, and they provide support for the persons of ethnic minorities when they need to access government bodies or other services to receive assistance. And they also provide assistance with interpreting when and where they make the application with the state authorities, with lawyers and with healthcare institutions, with other institutions such as law enforcement bodies. They also help national minorities to receive medical and educational services, and they provide them with the information how to receive these services, and they assist with communication with law enforcement and healthcare institutions when the persons of national minorities want to get access. And also the mediators communicates with enterprises and experts in order to assist with the provision of services to ethnic and national minorities. And also they raise awareness and also provide information concerning medical, legal, educational, and other type. They participate in census and also sociological questionnaires when there is a need to contact ethnic and national minorities. As for the requirements, such mediators need higher education, and they need to have a bachelor's degree in a respective field. There is no specific requirements as to the experience, and also if they don't have the education or the job experience that are established by the requirements, but they have practical experience, then it is possible for them to work. And I give the floor to
Чи присутня з нами пані Оксана?
to Ms. Oksana.
Якщо немає, шановні колеги, ми
If no,
почали цей
dear colleagues, then we finish this section. Maybe you have questions to the participants.
пропозиція.
I don't see any questions in the chat, and Olena Bogdan proposed to establish special centers of preschool preparation that engage pedagogues that are qualified to work with Roma children and know either Roma or Hungarian or other language to overcome the language barriers in the places where Roma community live. If there is no other remark, then we move on to the next section, legal protection, access to ID, registration, and anti-discrimination. And I give the floor to Volodymyr Kondor, chairman of the Coalition of Roma NGOs of Ukraine. Thank you. I welcome the participants of today's event, and it is a great honor for me to have the floor here, and I will make a speech on behalf of the coalition, and I would like to suggest the analytical report on what the coalition is doing in order to prevent all forms of discrimination against Roma ethnic minority and the safety of the community equal rights in receiving services from government bodies, children's rights, the rights of families are in focus of the coalition. Therefore, today our main task is, together with partner NGOs and government authorities, as it was mentioned, is to adopt the action plan to the Roma strategy, and it's important to see it implemented on the regional level. Also to design the program so that it becomes more effective, so that we have this action plan that correlates with the state and local budget. And as a result, it could improve the living conditions of vulnerable categories of the population. And I would like to give an overview of the monitoring situation concerning the hate crime and also the crimes based on hate against Roma community. So it's Zakarpattia, Chernihiv, Kiev, and other regions where we see that 125,000 people of Roma ethnic origin live. And now we already registered over 29 cases of against hate crime against Roma community. Most cases were registered with the police, and there are ongoing criminal proceedings. But there are cases when Roma themselves are afraid and don't want to go to law enforcement authorities for various reasons, and that's why these crimes are not registered by the police. So the monitoring included the cases in Lashchenivka, the case of murder of David Papa, also the crime near the village of Vilshane. They don't have any logical conclusions, so they are not resolved. And most of the crimes are registered in Kiev, Cherkasy, and Chernihiv Oblast, and already we have 4 cases in the city of Irpin and others, and also in Kiev. On October 17 in Irpin, near Kiev, the representatives of radical and nationalistic organizations started the protest against Roma, where they voiced some discrimination statements, and also there was violence against the Roma population. And regrettably, these actions received some, I don't know, financial or psychological support, and they have the opportunity to do it systematically, to campaign against national minorities, notably Roma minority. And according to the police data, within a project implemented by Freedom House, the number of such violation is carried out against such temporary settlements of Roma travelers that seek employment in Ukraine. These people come from Zakarpattia, who left and also left their homes to find a job to support their families. And in our opinion, as NGO thinks, local authorities do not specify the issues of Roma minority as a separate issue. So when these people appear in the amalgamated territorial communities, they do not receive the necessary assistance necessary social support, and this becomes an issue today. So there is a widespread practice of shifting the responsibility and these unresolved issues to NGOs. Thank you, Volodymyr. Please follow the time because we don't have much.
Едуарду Калугіну, головний спеціаліст
Eduard Kalugin, specialist of Department for Interaction with Public Authorities of Monitoring Department of Ministry of Internal Affairs. Good afternoon, colleagues. Our joint activity, inclusion of Roma Authority, is especially important in the line of European integration. We are conducting policy conducted by State Migration Service and National Police. We observe positive things. We were engaged in development new Roma strategy and action plan. We continue actions to prevent crimes conducted on the basis of hate and discrimination. In September, we had a meeting with OSCE High Commissioner National Minorities, Mr. Karat Abdurrahmanov, and his delegation. And we agreed upon joint actions of OSCE and our ministry, exchange of experience, policing activity in the regions, and engagement of national communities, preventing ethnic conflicts, and further ensuring equal rights of all ethnic communities. Part of the tasks of the strategy are responsibility of Ministry of Interior. One of them is providing ID documents to Roma people. My colleagues will speak more of that, but I will make focus on some issues. Security issues are more or less clear, but issuing passports to Roma people has its specificity. The fact of possessing a passport gives you possibility to get social benefits, to get employed, get access to education, but there are some difficulties of regulatory nature. But the biggest problem is subjective factor, lack of desire of Roma themselves to integration. All that could be achieved only with active position of Roma organizations and efforts of local self-government. Awareness campaign among Romas themselves is especially important because Roma communities do not provide open access to other representatives, like Madam Borgman mentioned that she saw during her monitoring. We are ready to cooperation. Thank you. Thank you, Eduard Kaluga. I give the floor to Ruslan Gorechenko, head of the Human Rights Department of National Police. Good afternoon, dear Mr. Chairman, dear participants. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and tell about work of National Police on that. National Police realizes the problems, all problems mentioned today, in particular in relation to ethnic minorities' work. We elaborate a special action plan towards the newly adopted strategy. Roma minority requires special attention and special measures, and we elaborate a special action plan, annual action plan. And we provide to our unit special tasks that they should do within a year. What are the major issues? We are going to monitor places of temporary and permanent residence of Roma communities to establish systemic communication and control of the movement and to ensure security in the places of their residence. We allocate a special police officer or communal policing officer responsible for that. Apart from that, we allocate a special officer of juvenile justice systems to work with the children in Roma settlements. We specify a special unit, patrol police, which is patrolling in the area adjacent to Roma settlement, who is responsible for rapid response. National police alone cannot resolve the problems mentioned today. We can try to ensure security, but by joining our efforts, we can resolve all the problems. We initiate and organize meetings with local authorities, with civil society organizations and other stakeholders, and with the elders of Roma communities and other representative Roma community to have discussions and decide jointly how to resolve existing problems. As regards the problems mentioned today, investigative units of national police can use Article 161 of Criminal Code of Ukraine. We monitor situation, analyze how often this article is used, and jointly with Ukrainian Foundation of Legal Aid, with advocates and human rights defender, with Freedom House organization, we conducted the study how crimes based on hate and discrimination are investigated. So most important is Article 161, violation of equality of citizens of Ukraine based on their ethnic or racial religion origin. This article requires harmonization with international acts regarding investigating of such type of crimes. Article 165 doesn't give the possibility to define the corpus delicti of this particular crime and to investigate crimes on the ground of intolerance. And sometimes some cases are terminated. Definition of such terms as hatred, intolerance, and definition of the crimes based on the motives of intolerance should be defined more clearly in legislation. We drafted a legislation in May this year on amendments to the Code of Administrative Offense and to the Criminal Code of Ukraine to combat cases of discrimination. This draft law provides, among other things, unification of terminology that I spoke about. Besides, our Department of Monitoring Human Rights, we have possibility to cooperate with international civil society organizations to counteract discrimination, to ban biased attitude to ethnic minorities on the part of our policemen. We cooperate with the organization of Mr. Condor. We organize trainings for policemen. We organized training for 150 policemen last year. Another training is planned for November this year. With the report of UN advisory mission, we elaborated information materials that we disseminated to every regional department of police that they disseminated to community, and people know how to file an application if such crimes are committed. We also cooperate with UNDP program. We are elaborating posters, providing information for victims of hate crimes that will be placed in every department of police. What problems remained? That doesn't allow us to work effectively. We don't have actual data, number of Roma in particular settlement, access to education,
Дякую, пане Руслан.
etc.
Слово Тетяні Сіренко.
Thank you. I give the floor to Tetiana Sirenko, Specialist Department of Passport Registration. Citizens from temporary occupied territory of Ukraine and Department of Citizenship, State Migration Service.
Да-да, ми вас чуємо.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Але чуємо, пані
We don't see you, but we can hear you. Just a second. Okay, I will start my presentation. First of all, I would like to mention that certain changes in legislation happened. It would be of interest to you to know that. We managed to make changes to the decree of Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, decree regarding issuing passport to citizens of Ukraine as of March 2015. Recent changes came in force on the 2nd of November this year. These amendments allow citizens of Ukraine to get a passport of Ukraine in the form of a card in the place of your residence. If previously you should get a passport in the place of your official residence, now any limitations regarding your official or actual place of residence are removed. You can apply to any territorial center of migration service or center of administrative services in any regions of Ukraine to get your passport of citizen of Ukraine. This is first important change. You can get a passport of a citizen of Ukraine first time and get your tax code ID number without the requirement to come personally to tax authorities. So we fulfill these functions. We have all technical capabilities for that. There are other changes, how passports are issued to persons who are in pretrial detention. You know, in pretrial detention centers, there were people who didn't have passports, so now they can get it. And the same issue regarding persons who reside abroad but need a passport of Ukraine. Very often question is asked how to simplify procedures. Now this procedure is simplified in order to go through identification procedure. Enough is to engage one member of your family, one relative, or even an ex-wife or ex-husband could be invited for identification. Family members or neighbors are engaged, but at least if there are witnesses who are not members of the families, there must be several of them. And this procedure of identification should be in the presence of witnesses. And relevant documents should be provided. Marriage certificate, certificate about termination of marriage, birth certificate, etc. to identify a person. Relevant acts are concluded. So this period of going through the procedure should not exceed 2 months. This procedure of identification of a person is conducted only in cases when a person reaches 18 years of age but have not received a passport. If a person is 14 years of age, having birth certificate, have passports of parents and wants to get a passport of citizen of Ukraine, the entire procedure that I have mentioned will not be conducted. What organizational measures are taken in order that citizens of Ukraine can get information from website of State Migration Service? Now we have an electronic service and questionnaire, electronic questionnaire online. You can preliminary fill in this questionnaire electronically in order the data go into single democratic register. And you get information from website, what are the documents you should provide. We also have chatbots that function in social networks, Viber, Telegram. On the website of State Migration Service, you can get information about all these sites. What is important to overcome poverty among Roma population. Having all those chatbots, Vibers, etc., for that you should have gadgets, internet, and money. As regards provision of administrative services, if you get passport first time, you do not pay administrative fee. What else can I say? As regards procedure of identification of a person, when this identification procedure is completed, a conclusion is provided. If conclusion is negative, in that case, either person is not identified or thank you, Tatiana, for very interesting and needy information. And now we give the floor to Viktor Inkevich, representative of the Commissioner for Equal Rights and Freedoms. Good afternoon, dear participants. First of all, I want to mention what Olena Bogdan mentioned today, with Yuri Kolovanenko. They expressed the opinion that, of course, if Roma community itself doesn't make steps themselves to move forward, it will take more time to resolve the existing problems. I want to inform you that this year we had a number of monitoring visits in the regions of Ukraine. Different Roma settlements were visited. We checked how recommendations of the special ombudsman report are implemented. You know that last year ombudsman issued a report how COVID impacted Roma community. We also monitored possible abuses or not implementation of the functions of state authorities when they didn't take measures to protect human rights. I want to share my impressions. What causes special concern? Low educational level among adults, illiteracy of adult Roma population that does not allow them to help their children during online education. Illiteracy among adult Romas does not allow them to get proper free medical services for themselves and for their children. Because in the hospital, it's written in big letters what citizens of Ukraine rights are to get free education. They cannot read it, and nobody explains that to them. Illiteracy creates obstacles for implementation of election rights. During recent local elections, some Romas could not vote because they cannot read. And the law does not allow to get into voting cabin with other person. You can provide help only with voter with disability. One should review the provisions of election code. Maybe some exceptions should be made, not only people with disability. but allow such assistance for Roma and maybe other voters who are illiterate. Help of Roma mediators could be used and give them exceptional right to help illiterate Roma voters to vote. Or member of a family could provide help to such illiterate voter. I want to draw your attention to the fact when we visited non-sanctioned settlements in Chernihiv region, what situation we faced. There were 16 school-age children living there. The settlement exists for 6 years, but none of them visited school in the course of these years. This is a hereditary problem. We must fight it.
Рекомендації такі по результатам
And maybe the recommendations according to the results of this round table would be to recommend the ministry to study the regional issues and in order to overcome the illiteracy, maybe to organize Sunday schools or classes to promote literacy and engage them into other programs. And also illiteracy is used sometimes. And here there is a whole range of abuses to remove children born to Roma families, undocumented Roma families, and illiterate children are removed to be then illegally adopted. And this practice is present not only in independent Ukraine, but we've seen such practice also in the USSR, and we will further study these issues. And I would like to inform you that in October, we carried out an interagency working group on Roma platform, and we researched the... Thank you, Victor. Dear colleagues, we have questions to Ms. Tatiana Sirenko. First of all, I would like to draw your attention to the representative of the State Migration Service. If we can receive the information you provided to us in writing during I think this is the question from Ms. Zamfira Kondor, and I think we'll do this. Tomorrow I will have the meeting with the head of the State Migration Service, and I will make an application in writing for this information to be provided to all the participants of this round table. This is a very good proposal for you to disseminate this information on receiving the passports of the citizens of Ukraine. And the question, could you tell us where to go, where to apply if a person has a Soviet passport and they've never had any other document? This is the question to Tatiana Sirenko. And also the question from Larissa Domchenko, NGO, Rom. If the mother has no birth certificate, how the child can get a passport? Yes, the questions are clear. If we receive the request for information, we will provide a full answer on to the changes of legislation. Now, as towards the question, if a mother doesn't have a birth certificate, if she doesn't have it, then The question would better go to the Ministry of Justice, because in order to receive the passport of the citizen of Ukraine, you need to provide a birth certificate, and in accordance with the latest changes in its absence, this is the act and also the originals of the documents that prove the citizenship of the parents. So it is the passports of parents and not their birth certificates, so that the child could receive.
Пані Лариса, я надам вам слово. Хай пані Тетяна закінчить відповідь. І також питання було по червоному паспорту. А
And
потім я...
also the question about the Soviet passport. And also there are cases where parents don't have the passport of the citizen of Ukraine, or they do not want to provide the child with this document. There are various cases in life. So if a person comes to us, then the checks are carried out according to the registrations with the territorial bodies. They are now digitized. And if a person says that in this case, I don't have the passport of one of the parents, then we check this information in our registries. But if there is no birth certificate, if the parents failed to receive such a document, then the parents need to obtain such a document. And we understand that the check for the citizenship is carried out according to the IDs. As to the second question, if we have passports of parents and they have Soviet documents, then we need to carry out the check concerning the citizenship of Ukrainian citizenship, and we need to provide the certification that the person was registered in Ukraine in 1991, meaning that the person was registered as a citizen of Ukraine. After this, we carry out other checks that only concern the identification of a person. If there is no confirmation that the person was registered in 1991 and they still have the Soviet passport, then there will be another procedure in place, which is defined by the provision 215 by the order of the President of Ukraine as for the acquiring the Ukrainian citizenship. And there may be cases where you would need to go to court to establish the fact with the help of witnesses that the person lived on the territory of Ukraine, and then the identification will be carried out in court. But the full consultation can be received if you see the documents, if you see the dates, and other checks are done in accordance with the territorial registries and the data of the territorial bodies. Please, Larissa Donchenko.
Ви десь підіймали руку, вже немає. Отже, шановні колеги, якщо більше бажаючих задати...
So, dear colleagues, if there are no other questions, we move on to the next section, access to healthcare and medical services. And I would like to give the floor to Valentina Zolotarenko, Roma mediator. Please. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear participants. For me, it is a great honor to represent Roma mediators that work in various oblasts in Ukraine. In our work, we identify Roma needs and represent them to various government institutions to resolve specific issues. I would like to accentuate the need to access healthcare and medical services. And because of the practice of isolation, many Roma families become very vulnerable in the current crisis because they don't have access to health services and drinking water. They don't have the opportunity to sign the declaration with the family doctor because of the absence of documents that identify people, and it also impedes their access to social welfare. Ambulances refuse to take people to hospitals, and which further limits their access to healthcare services. In Zakarpattia, we witness the segregation in maternity wards and child hospitals, which also leads to further discrimination. During the COVID pandemic, a lot of people didn't have personal hygiene products, and it was especially hard for people living in Roma settlements that are located in distant regions, and so the masks, gloves, and sanitizers were provided by mediators, NGOs, and international organizations. And we also received a report about the refusal to take the Roma with COVID to hospitals, and this issue was resolved with the help of the Ministry of Healthcare helpline. So here we have the strategy of inclusion of Roma national minority. And in order to implement the Roma strategy, we need specific steps to ensure Roma access to healthcare services. And starting this year, we have a special profession, which is a community mediator, and it was a long way in the making, and now it allows to employ specific mediators. For that, we need information letters and awareness campaigns to explain the specificities of the community mediator profession. And I would like to thank the Council of Europe, also the Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights in their work to protect the rights of Roma men and women. And I thank you. I give the floor to Asan Charukov, Acting Director General of the Directorate of Medical Support of the Ministry of Health of Ukraine. Good afternoon. I'm sorry, Asan Charukov is now in the meeting with the Deputy Minister, so he delegated this task to me, Konstantin Shepitko, the head for the primary medical care development. I listened, I followed carefully the speeches of the participants, and the reports were very interesting and objective, but I would like to agree with the participant, with Mr. Victor, that also the Roma community need to make a step forward on their part when it concerns the declaration with the family doctor. There are two sides to this issue. The first is the law of Ukraine, the basis of the legislation on healthcare, where we see exactly the procedures. The second side is the order 503 on the procedure of selection of a doctor who provides medical care. and what are the rules for the family physicians in concluding the declaration. A person wanting to sign the declaration need to have a passport of a citizen of Ukraine, their birth certificate or a temporary certificate, the certificate of the refugee or person who needs special protection. If you have any such document, you can sign the declaration. Without these documents, it is impossible. This is our clear position, and we will stand by it. The second side of this issue is the it is necessary for Roma to have the passport of a citizen of Ukraine or any of the above mentioned documents. So that we could provide the medical assistance. This is our position as to the declaration. Without the declaration, you can ask the assistant, you can go to the family physician if there is an emergency, and in this case, an emergency, the doctor must provide medical assistance. The ambulances go to all the respond to all the calls without exception, and ambulances go to anyone who called the emergency services. Thank you, dear colleagues. All the participants in the field of healthcare and medical services took the floor, and we have the now Rada Kalandia asked to take the floor. Good afternoon again. I would like to provide a commentary about the declaration. I'm sorry, we have difficulty hearing. The question was important for me.
Алло.
Да, кажіть.
Дивіться, в нашій області, в
In
Донецькій,
our oblast, in Donetsk Oblast, there is a city of Krakow there, where there are big families and they have the documents, but the doctors do not want to sign the declarations with Roma. They say that they have no places. And I would really love for you to help us so let's do it this way, Rada. Could you please give us your mobile phones and my assistants will contact you because I myself represent Donetsk Oblast, because I can't understand how it happens that family physicians don't have places to take people. You see, the family doctors have a specific plan to sign the declarations, and they only can have, let's just say, 1,000 people. And if they have another person, they will not be able to sign the declaration. But if in your oblast there are doctors and there are not enough of them, then it's a kind of a serious issues, because the family physician must accept the declaration from you. But if they have already the allocated number of people, then for pediatricians, it means 900 children. For family physicians, is 1,700, and for GPs, it's 2,000. And so if they are reach their limit, then the question is that the local self-governing bodies need to find young people who would like to be doctors. You need to encourage them to then join the medical profession, and then they become family doctors, and then they would go back to the community. I understand that it's a long process. Now you say this, but then many years will pass and people will stay without medical care. So I think that just as in Donetsk Oblast and in other oblasts, there are cases, and then they engage the family doctor from the neighboring territorial community. I'm sure that not every doctor reached their limit until 2,200. This is the number of people that the family doctor can take on. So Ms. Rada gave her phone, and my assistants will work on it, but don't tell it publicly that the local governments will be engaging children to further medical education. But you see, it's not legal to say that people will stay without medical care.
Я прошу вас долучити
Mr.
офісу.
Lubinets, I ask you to give us information about this case, give us telephone, and we shall double check it, why this number is exceeded just by Roma people. Mr. Konstantin Shepard, I inform you, we heard your remark. I personally believe it is discriminatory, and I shall inform your leadership that we all publicly heard your attitude to Roma ethnic minority. Is anybody else willing? Belarus Christina, please. Can you hear me? Yes. I have a question to Konstantin regarding healthcare reform. If a person doesn't have a passport but is asking for primary health care, and that person is refused because this person has no identification document, what to do? Shall we call a hotline or get indignant, or will you offer any solution? First of all, I want to apologize for what I said. You misunderstood me. I didn't mean that. I have due respect to all people. There are other Ukrainians who do not have enough possibility to get serviced by a particular family doctor. They come to other territorial community doctor. As regards this question, if you have an emergency situation, you can call or come to family doctor. If it is an urgent medical aid, you will not be refused. But what can I do if I need emergency surgery? I don't know how to call it medically. This is the secondary level of healthcare. Unfortunately, the system is built in such a way that without an indication of family doctor, a person cannot get to the secondary level. If this is an emergency case, an emergency ambulance comes, they make decision, take you to the hospital. But if ambulance is not called, what to do? Christina, I ask you, we have a round table. This is not a particular consultation. So I don't see the way out. You must go only to family doctor. I can inform you, if you call an emergency medical aid, no matter what papers you have or have not, no matter what citizen, which country you are, or a stateless person, according to the law, you will be provided emergency medical aid. You will get this service. After that, to get access to secondary level of health care, you need an indication of the family doctor, but emergency aid will be provided. You can call an ambulance, they will come, and they will not refuse you hospitalization if you don't have a passport. If such things happen, please inform me personally or my committee, we shall interfere. As regards remark of Constantine, even when second time you spoke, you said that Ukrainians don't have it, access. It doesn't matter whether they are Ukrainians or ethnic minorities, they're all citizens of Ukraine, or stateless person. No discrimination is allowed because of that. I draw your attention to this, Constantine. I don't know who delegated you to our event, but such statements are not acceptable, especially at public events when any problems are discussed with national minority. In principle, a person working in Ministry of Health or any other ministry cannot make statements like that. I inform you immediately. I shall inform your direct leadership about what you said. Thank you. Now we come to the next chapter, Rights of Romani Women. And I give the floor to Julian Kondor, Project Coordinator of International Charity Organization, Chirikli. Thank you, Dmitro. A welcome, colleague. Since I'm speaking in the last panel, much has been told already. Almost in every session, Roma women problems were mentioned. You must only note that, in fact, we see that in few recent years, especially when previous strategy cycle was implemented, Roma women issue became a priority one. And it remains in the new strategy. At regional level, strategy must include this issue as well. Not only different state authorities, departments or units are engaged. Important is that civil society organizations, Roma women themselves take part in the elaboration of regional action plans. Another important aspect mentioned today, new criteria for granting social benefit to single mothers. They have disproportionate negative effect at Roma women. This issue should be further discussed professionally. The question is not criteria themselves, but what effect it has at Roma women. I want to add that for our organization, which is Roma Women Organization, important is to empowerment women, development of Roma women leadership. We have a number of problems with Finland with the Akoni Institute, where we facilitate economic independence of Roma women, helping them to get professions, different areas. With UN Women Project, we work in pilot communities in Torchin, Volyn region, and Vehtere, Kherson region. In the course of this year and half of next year, we are planning to ensure more active participation of Roma women in communities. We are working with our partners on that. So this is one of the priority areas of work for us. I do not want to repeat many important things mentioned already. I shall make focus only at one important issue, which is security in the country. It is important for society at large. As regards women, taking into account especially complicated situation of women, we are recording incidents where victims are victims of hate crimes. We ask especially national police to act and to help to prevent situation that Roma women become victims of such incidents. That is all. Thank you. Thank you, Julian. I give the floor to Natalka Karbowska, Director of Strategic Development of the Ukrainian Women's Fund. Thank you very much, Metro. Dear participants, I shall be brief because I'm traveling. Thank you for the invitation to speak at this roundtable, which is very important. I heard a lot of important information, and I will use it in the work of our organization. It's no doubt that all problems mentioned here, all challenges in sphere of education, access to justice, economical problems, of course, they are twice as much for Roma women. Can you hear me well? Yes, it's okay. I can hear you. So women, Roma women have twice as much same problems. For all women in Ukraine and the Roma women especially, to resolve all these problems. In our opinion, it's very important that our voice is heard and we get united with single-minded people. And within the framework of the project implemented by International Women's Fund with support of Canadian government, we work actively. And we are very proud of having thematic partners, Chirikli Fund. Chirikli is helping us to adapt our programs to the needs of Roma women and to act in such a way that the Roma Women's Organization address us more and get more support from us. And we, in our turn, can help them in the way and with the resources that they need. For 2 years already, we are working in this format, and I must say that even Ukraine Women's Fund was providing grant support to women organizations. Previously, we were receiving few applications from Roma women organizations. In the recent 2 years, this number has increased a lot. Important is that not only number, but the quality of this application is much higher. I'm pleased to see that representatives of our organizations, grantees, are present at this roundtable. What is my recommendation based on our experience? It is very important for Roma organizations to work with other organizations, human rights organizations, with women's movement, that will empower the initiative and strengthen position of Roma women. One thing more, we see Roma women among graduates of our women's leadership programs. And they are very powerful leaders in their communities. And I hope very much that at next elections, local elections and parliamentary elections, they will run more. And they will sit at tables where decisions are made in our country. I want to add one thing more. Women's movement in a broader sense needs voices and support of Roma women. We work together with Zola Condor and other women present here. We're always glad to meet them at Women's March. Your voices join voices of broad community of women activists, and I believe that they will add to the voices of organizations that advocate the ratification of Istanbul Convention. Domestic violence issue is very topical for Roma women, other women. So thank you very much again for the opportunity to take part in this event and invite you all to cooperation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Natalia. So, dear colleagues, I see Vera Melnik raised the hand, so please 1 minute comment. Turn on your microphone. Welcome, colleagues. I'm Vera Melnik, UN Women in Ukraine. Much has been told today on that. I just want to add about access of Roma women to services in conditions of decentralization. UN Women, jointly with our partners and civil society organizations and the Ombudsman Office, are at the final stage of our study. Impact of Decentralization on Human Rights is the title. We pay great attention to women from vulnerable groups, in particular to Roma women. Decentralization impacted women and men differently in many ways. Negative impact was found in our study, how it impacted vulnerable women, Roma women in particular. Roma women often happen to be illiterate, they cannot read and write. It's difficult for them to find job. Local authorities do not provide access to preschool education. Even if such services exist, they are for payment, and Roma families with many children cannot pay for all them. That prevents access of women to employment. Another issue is access to medical services. Much has been told on that. But during our study, we found that Roma women have problems with access to services of reproductive health. It's a well-known situation. There are separate wards in maternity homes for Roma women, which is unacceptable. Based on the results of our analysis, we provided a number of recommendations for local self-government and other state authorities. In particular, important is to collect disaggregated data and to prepare gender profiles in order that local authorities can clearly understand which groups of population live in their communities, to ensure provision of services to all of them, and to ensure human rights based on the needs on particular groups of people. The vulnerable group. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues. We have concluded the work. So as regards to other comments, documentation, and problems in Mariupol, my assistants will call you. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning, I will have meeting the head of migration service together with Deputy Minister of Interior. Among other things, we shall raise the issues that you mentioned, issuing passports to Roma ethnic minority, As regards question from Larissa Domchenko, tomorrow I shall provide the answer how to get birth certificate to a child. Mother was born in Russia, but children were born in Ukraine. So tomorrow we shall provide the answer. Or maybe Migration Service will offer a kind of concept how to resolve things like that. And I provided on the Facebook page of our Human Rights Committee. Thank you all for working very fruitfully. We had a lot of new information. I think that based on today's round table, we shall convoke meeting of our committee, collect all this information, and make recommendations and send them to central authority. I'm very thankful to all who took part in the meeting. It was very constructive discussion. As regards what happened with the Ministry of Health representative statement, I asked my secretariat to prepare a letter to the leadership of the ministry regarding this, and I shall write a letter to Ombudsman Office asking them to respond to avoid cases like that. Thank you for participation. Special thanks to our international partners. Council of Europe office in Ukraine, thank you for helping us. Personal thanks to you, Zemfira Kondor, for helping us not only with Roma issues, but all minorities issues. Help us to understand their problem, facilitate their resolution. Thank you all. Hope to have more meetings. I wish you all health. Take care of yourself.